Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning and welcome to another Point of View. We've already done this intro once about 2 minutes ago due to the fact we weren't actually live. So this is the second time. But thanks for joining us. This morning we're going to be talking about grit and the concept of grit and the fact that Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, has said that children need more of it and perhaps schools should teach it. So that'll be fun. After that, we're going to move on to horror toilets, in inverted commas, the issue of a survey that came out from Parentkind that basically said that parents were concerned about the cleanliness and safety in school toilets. 25% at secondary, 12% at primary said they were unclean, and a proportion of parents say that when they complain, nothing really happens to sort out the issue of the toilets. So that will be issue number 2. And I'm joined this morning by Ray Whitehouse and Lucy Trimnell, otherwise known as Rage House. So if you're looking...
Rage.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said rage.
Rage Whitehouse.
Oh,
no, Rage,
yeah.
Rage Whitehouse.
Yeah. Let's not get the social media handle wrong. All right. Some people are really precious about it, aren't they?
They're not. No.
Anyway, they're the 2 stories we're going to discuss this morning. So thanks for joining. As always, you can get involved by posting a comment if you're watching on YouTube or X. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what you're doing this morning. Tell us where you are, how you're feeling, what you're doing. Send us a comment in, give us a like, give us a subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, or a follow if you're watching it somewhere else. Lucy, I'll start with you then. Grit.
Okay, so my query would be, what do we mean by grit? And I think without identifying exactly what it means, I think it's a difficult one to discuss because it's an old-fashioned term that really refers to your resilience and your ability to cope with things. Bridget Phillipson believes that schools need to teach grit. My query would be whether grit isn't something that's already being learned in the home before children start school at the age of 4 or 5. We have a lot of parents nowadays who like to jump in, do things for their children, help them, shield them from life's difficulties. And I think that much of your grit and it goes with determination, doesn't it? Your ability to solve problems and to find ways around your struggles. I think that a lot of that starts in the home, and I'm not quite sure how you can teach it so much as model it. That would be and the article does refer to that, to be honest, in terms of praising emotional safety, and they've sort of labelled it and given it terms, and model grace in action, your ability to display as a teacher, for example, when things are difficult, how you can manage those in a calm and sort of considered manner. But I think most teachers do that anyway. I don't know quite how far we can go in teaching children to have grit.
Would you say that grit... Okay, let's imagine grit means character then. Let's imagine that grit means... I'm not saying this is, because I think we can debate a definition, but let's say grit means character, having a determination to carry on no matter what, keep going, resilience, being able to sort of... I'm not going to use the term bury emotion, but I'm gonna power through, and I'm gonna have grit in the face of real sort of challenge and so on, right? So let's say that was the definition of it. If we're saying, are we saying that kids of prior generations had more grit in general, if we were to do a survey of them, than the current generation?
I think so.
Say that, or
I think so. I do think that's the case. When we were at school, you didn't go, if you fell out with your friends, Nobody sent an email around to all the teachers to say, just to let you know that Lucy and Ray have fallen out today, and there may be some difficulties, so give them a bit of space. Those kinds of things. You worked through those issues yourselves. And again, it comes back to what I was saying, that we jump in now as adults. We jump in and we solve things. We're the saviours for the children. And I think that's probably where that, if we're going to call it grit, and it's not character, because everybody has a character. And so I'm not so keen on that, but that ability, that trait in a character to be able to fire through your problems, like you say, to be able to put things behind you. I mean, good grief, you'd go to school and you'd have a really difficult day for some reason because somebody was being horrible to you. Lovely cat, by the way. And then you would and then you would go home, and once you got home, then you would mope about it all day, but you didn't, you had to put on a brave face. And I think we've lost that ability.
We have. And I remember for the many years I was a head of year, being so frustrated, the foolishness that I had to deal with. And I worked, one of the schools I was a head of year in, it was very, the heads of year were highly trained in safeguarding, and we were involved in all sorts of things that at my current school, it's all the DSLs that deal with it. The heads of year don't deal with it at all. So we had really intense, important, significant, traumatic, awful things to be dealing with that somebody had to deal with, and it was partly our job in that school, and we'd be trying to cope with that. And then, you know, year 8 girls would come in crying because their friend wasn't talking to them, and I remember just thinking, I have my list of priorities. And this is way at the bottom. I don't remember ever in school, ever, a teacher, like any of us running to a teacher over something that minor. Like, if in primary school, yeah. But in secondary school, are you kidding? So you would have been bullied to death if you'd gone crying to a teacher about your friendship dramas, and apart from which, obviously, but it would have. And nowadays, the students don't even have to go to the teacher and say there's an issue. The people are just automatically jumping in. Oh, I noticed you're, the teachers will raise social problems to pastoral staff as if. How did teenagers cope in the past when adults weren't jumping in and solving all of their problems for them? I guess they figured it out, and they developed social skills and conflict resolution strategies and managed on their own, which then helped them in adulthood. And I really, really, really worry for these kids that have no idea how to solve an interpersonal conflict without someone twice their age telling them how to do it and holding their hand.
Absolutely. And even at primary school, if you went to your teacher and said that happened, they'd send you on your way and say, well, you need to go and talk it over, go and work it out. They wouldn't come and, sort of sit down and mediate. I mean, mediation should be reserved for really important issues. And obviously you need to have that pastoral care for those huge, huge issues, which, can come up during a day. But for things like that, there's all the trivialities now. We've taken those out of children's hands, and we encourage them to let us know and to talk about it. And I just feel as though, like you say, that the role of school is to prepare people for adulthood, and it doesn't do that when because there's nobody you're going to go to at work when you've fallen out with somebody.
There's not.
And so if you've not got those skills, how do you people manage? With my own children, I've never got involved. I've never in all kinds of things, where they've said, even I've had a tough time at school, the teachers are, oh well, never mind, you have to sort it out for yourselves, because I really believe in that. I think it's so important. I remember my son when he was tiny, really, really tiny. This is my eldest. We had a big tub full of toys, and he couldn't get a toy out, and he was lifting and lifting, and he couldn't get this toy out, and he looked over to me, and fortunately, because I didn't know this stuff, but I was quite lazy and I was probably really tired, and so I said, lift out the other things first, and then he did. And it's that kind of thing. We jump in now, don't we, because we feel as if as parents you're not doing a good job unless you're there playing with your child and sort of demonstrating, whereas actually they've got to figure stuff out for themselves.
Yeah, they do. And there's a lot of discussion around grit, saying, I mean, the article kind of it talks about one of the articles we're looking at, the one in TESS, talks about neurodivergence and how neurodivergent pupils might be, unduly suffering because of this "we need more grit" attitude. But I don't think that's necessarily, they're not necessarily, neurodivergent students aren't necessarily automatically the ones that struggle the most with grit or the concept of grit as it's commonly understood. The ones who struggle the most are the ones whose parents have done every single thing for them. And quite the opposite to what you'd expect. It's not the students who experience neglect. It's not the students who experience trauma. It's not the students who experience these things. Because actually they've had to demonstrate grit and they've developed it because they've had no choice, and that's unfair. And they've been, they've aged beyond their years unfairly, and they've been parentified and all sorts. But it's the students who come from those cushy homes, from those, comfortable upbringings. They're the ones who often struggle the most with it because mummy and daddy have never let them solve a problem in their lives by themselves. So it's not, for all the discussion about which students are being harmed, a lot of people say it's the the students who've had these really rough beginnings in life, and they're being forced into some more rough situations and not being supported. They cope better. They cope better because they've had to, and they continue to have to, and they do. It's the students that have been coddled that really, really struggle with this. It's not that who people think.
If you're enjoying the show this morning, of course, we need to thank our amazing sponsor, John Catt Educational, who are leading publishers of professional development resources around the world. If you want to pick up a book at the John Catt website, you can do it at johncattbookshop.com, and you can get 20% off any book on there by using JCTTR2425. So head over there, get yourself a book for gain time. You can be sat there reading a book, lovely, in the sunshine, free period. They'll let you out. They'll let you out in the back garden. So the reason I asked you that about the grit thing in the past, okay, so you both think that kids had more grit back in the day, whatever that might be, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whatever.
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going. Right, absolutely. I mean, if I think about my nan, who's 99 now, she was evacuated. I mean, a lot of kids were evacuated, weren't they, when they were 13, 14. So that was when she was like 13. She was literally just shipped out of home in Manchester and shipped to somewhere in Wales with her brother, right, away from her parents. So I sort of wonder what would happen now with that. So now, to caveat that, okay, we're talking about a situation of crisis. And I always think that kids and adults change in a situation of extreme crisis. So, for example, at the very start of COVID, before people really had any idea what was going to happen, right? I mean, vaccines hadn't even been talked about, right? It was like, we don't really know what this thing is. We know it could be really bad, whatever, right? At that point, in that first 4 weeks or something, or 6 weeks, was there a re-emergence of that idea of sort of grit, of resilience, of no, yeah, do you know what I'm going to do? I am going to lock myself away for the next 2 weeks. I'm not going to see anybody. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to be doing for the good of everybody, and I'm not going to sort of moan and complain as much, right? For a very short period of time. I don't know though whether that is just a perception, but the point I'm trying to make is, is it because we have lived at a certain level of comfort for a long time that we haven't really seen how kids and adults now would react to a moment of actual crisis, as in 1940 style crisis?
Now you're sounding like my grandfather.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but I'm saying I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying that that I'm almost defending the current sort of generations and this idea of grit. I'm almost defending that by saying we haven't really. Has there been a litmus test of that, other than obviously what you guys have said about the changing? I mean, I agree with you, the changing dynamic in schools. Paul's made a comment. A parent this week complained that we didn't warn their child that the fire brigade were visiting school. He doesn't like firemen or fire engines. I know that you're thinking, but no, there has been no previous trauma and they have no particular needs. They just complain because they don't like firemen and fire engines.
Oh.
This
is why I'll never be SLT. This is why it's never.
This is sort of a good example. I mean, this stuff happens, and I think one of the other things that's more common now as well is the whole thing of, my son or daughter is right, or my son or daughter doesn't lie. My son or daughter just doesn't lie. They don't lie.
Yep.
They don't lie. They just don't.
But they do because they're children.
It cannot happen. Yeah. It cannot happen. I know my son or daughter. They cannot lie. They cannot do something wrong. You must therefore be in the wrong. I think that happens. I mean, that's always to one degree or the other, but I think now it happens a lot more, right?
Yeah. Anyway. I mean, and that's got a lot worse even in the past 15 years. That I'd be aware of. I'm talking about my own experience as an adult, as a teacher, not as a child. It's gone drastically worse.
Okay. Point is though, I think it was you, Lucy, who said you can't teach grit, right? But doesn't that then not tally in with the idea that previous generations had more grit? Because they must have been taught that, whether it be by their parents or...
It's by experience. It's by experience. And because we're not giving children those experiences anymore, if you were in a classroom, I would imagine, particularly in a primary school classroom now, and a child came over and said, so-and-so said something to me in the playground and now she's not talking to me or something. If you said, right, go off and work out between yourselves, you could end up with what you're talking about, parents coming in and saying, this is not fair, you didn't sort out my child's problem when they came to you with the problem. And so it is a cycle, actually. There is a cycle of that parental feedback that children should be listened to, and that their problems. So when they are in your care in the school, you should give them that same attention that they get when they're at home. And so like Ray said, it tends to be those children who come from those really, really caring homes, to the point of sort of like we call it helicopter parenting and that kind of thing, that have the most problems with this. So and then that expectation, because they tend to be the most invested parents, they're the ones then coming in and saying, you've got the ones coming in saying, you've put my child in a detention and he's never done nothing wrong and you're wrong and you shouldn't do that. And then at the same time, you've got parents coming in saying, my child complained and nobody did anything about it. And so it's a really tricky sort of end-to-end difficulty. And actually, there may be a lot of children who are suffering very quietly with issues who, I don't know, maybe, just get on like we used to, and they'll be the ones that come out the other end eventually with that inner strength.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Okay, is it though a case that this is better though, in the sense that has society changed in some ways in a positive way, in that people's individual wants and needs are more recognized? So, for example, right, sort of. That whole get on with it thing, I guess, in my generation, when I was in school, right, in the 90s, would have maybe led to things being ignored, and therefore kids maybe having really bad, genuinely bad experiences, like, I don't know, being beaten up or bullied or getting in a fight or, whatever, right? Or even in some cases, problems between kids and teachers, right? Where, I remember one where a teacher in my school when I was a kid stood a kid up and said, I won't say the name, I'll make up the name, John Jones, you're being an absolute DH, right, in front of the whole class, right? And the whole class laughed, right? Obviously, because we were teenage kids. Now, I'm not so in that one. And to be honest, like the kid, right? I mean, listen, the kid, it's not, I don't know them now, but I know they're part of my sort of peer group I went to school with, so I don't speak to them, but I can't imagine that particular incident has caused them huge trauma, right? But I'm just making the point that we now pick up on everything. Now, you could argue we've gone from one extreme to another, but we could also argue that in the 90s, 80s, 70s, a lot of stuff was let fly that shouldn't have been let fly.
Yes.
That shouldn't have been brushed over as, oh, just get on with it. Come on, man up, and stop being whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that is the case. And I think that's where you need that healthy balance, isn't it? You need somebody to have eyes on who's thinking, so-and-so doesn't seem themselves anymore. And everything okay. And obviously we can't force children to tell us anyway about what's going on in their lives, but that's where we have those specialists, and that's where we raise those concerns, and that was what was missing in the 70s and the 80s and maybe in the 90s. I was at school in the 70s and 80s, so that gives you an idea how old I am. And I was smacked. So I was in assembly and I was called to the front for talking, and it wasn't me that was talking, but I've always remember thinking, it could have been me, because it usually was. And I had to go on the stage, and she said, bend over and touch your toes. And so I did, and I stood up, and she said, bend over, touch your toes and stay there. And she lifted my skirt over my back and smacked me in front of the whole assembly. Now, I've never forgotten that, but it's never traumatized me. I'm not saying we should go back to that, by the way, at all. I used to have to stand on my chair. You'd have to stand on your chair in the classroom and just stand there for, it felt like forever, but it didn't do me any harm, but I was probably quite emotionally resilient. I probably had that grit, I guess. Kids used to go out to play, and fewer kids go out to play now. So, if you fell over and you cut yourself, you kind of wiped it with leaves, or do you get what I mean? You didn't, whereas now, parents, children aren't out with their parents' ideas. They've got Germline in their bags and those kinds of things. And it's that kind of thing. So, in my day, we had that. So I guess we could cope with it. And like you said about going back to the war, I obviously hope that we never, ever face a situation like that again. I don't think we would deal with it in the same way. I don't know how we would deal with it, but I don't think you would take small children away from their parents and send them to safe places, because we know they weren't always safe in those places. And I'm not saying by any means that we should go back to smacking children publicly in assemblies, but I did learn a lesson from that. I learned not to talk in assembly again, even though it wasn't me. So so it did something for me. I haven't ever forgotten it, but I could tell you about it. I just laugh. I think it's really funny, but never should we go back to that. So we're not looking at building grit through extremes, but just children being given the freedom to explore their lives a bit more without adults sort of being the guardians of their free time.
Wouldn't that be nice? No one has scraped knees anymore. No one has like scabs on their legs from running through the bush.
Like these kids in my class the other week, this was like last week, kid comes up to me and goes, can I go to the bathroom because I've cut myself? And I went, okay, show me. And he literally raises his hand, and there is I'm talking about a dimple. I'm talking about that's happened like 5 times this year. I've this, and there's nothing. I'm like, no, you can't. You just can't. which probably makes me horrible and a disaster of a human being.
No.
But what I'm saying is that is where we're at. You're absolutely right about the Gray's knees, the I don't know, whatever. Things that just happen, they just don't happen anymore. Everything's very controlled and moderated now.
Absolutely.
Everything is just very much, it's like, this is what you're going to do. And to be fair, some of that is because of poor behavior. And I guess some of that is like, well, we have to do this because if we don't, we end up with the situation we're going to talk about in a minute of toilets getting vandalized and toilet paper all over them and urine all over the place and whatever, right? So actually, we've got to control everything. We've got to absolutely make sure that, kids are very, very structured in everything they do, breaks and lunches and so on. But yeah, we're talking about extremes, but also, I don't know, I think the extremes have definitely got more common.
And it becomes a cycle. It's what you guys have already said. So like sometimes I'm in a situation like you or Tom, where you've got the kid asking, oh, can I go medical? I've got a cut. And it's like the tiniest little split in the skin. And every instinct in me is going like, shut up. But and then in the back of my head, I'm like, do I want to have to write an email to explain my decision if a parent writes in and calls in and complain? No, I don't. I actually don't have time for that email. I actually don't have time to care about this. Here's the pass, go. Because I'm reinforcing that lack of capacity to deal with anything. And obviously 9 times out of 10, they just want to get out of the classroom. But like, it's my genuine, not fear of dealing with parental complaints, because parental complaints are stupid. I could care less, but I just don't have time I don't have the time to deal with it. So yeah, go to medical. I don't care. But we do these things that reinforce the behavior and we create the cycle. Like it goes so much further beyond cuts and not being allowed out to play. Like I was having a conversation on Thursday or Friday in the staff room, and we were talking about how so many year 12 students, no matter what school they've come from, our school, different schools, so many of them have a total lack of ability to organize themselves or cope with any sort of unstructured study time. Like they just can't do it. And I was like, okay, we're in the middle of June right now, and our year 11s are still here. We have not let our year 11s go on study leave. They are still here. Friday was their last day where they only had to come in for exams. Every single year 11 student, except a few that were sent on early study leave, has been in school. In every lesson, I taught a week and a half of English class where I was just babysitting. Yeah, literally babysitting. And we had a great time. We played some games. We ate some food. We blew some bubbles, because guess what I'm not making them do right now? It's mid-June. We do this to year 11. We prevent them from having any sort of freedom, sort of, we don't let them have to organize themselves or structure their own time, create a plan, be alone for 5 minutes to study themselves and actually take some ownership and some accountability. We structure every single thing for them. We treat them like prisoners. We don't give them any kind of freedom at all, act like they're incapable of managing themselves. And then we act shocked and awed when they show up in year 12 and they don't have those skills. We have created these, I think the monsters were created between 0 and 5, but we have nurtured these monsters, allowed these monsters to thrive. It's our fault. Like, we have done everything in our power to remove any kind of need for grit, to remove any kind of need for any sort of self-dependence or self-resilience. They are so used to having every single thing handed to them on a silver platter, and they cannot cope. We're not preparing them for their adulthood. We're not preparing them for the real world. We are setting them up for failure. And then we have the gall to moan about it.
If we went back to the Bridget Phillipson thing, what would she think? Because if she wants grit, I think we've all sort of identified that we need to be sort of sending kids off and going, right, this isn't something that I need to be dealing with. You need to sort it for yourself. then she needs to do something to support schools in that. So she needs to be able, the government, I mean, it's not just her, but, you know, as a spokesperson for education, she needs to back teachers up on being less attentive. And I wonder whether you'd get that, or whether Ofsted would still come in and say children were sent off and told to sort their own problems out, and therein lies the difficulty.
Well, two things I would say is Phillipson, in my opinion, she's hitting on a valid point. She's picked something, she's identified something that is a problem, right? So that's, in my opinion, I sort of give a tick there. But you're absolutely right, Lucy. It's like, what are you going to do about it, right? Teaching grit is not the answer to the problem of grit, whatever you want to call grit, define it as. It's not the answer. The answer, as always, lies with the students and the parents, the cultural and societal norms that we have endorsed, created. Paul made a point here. I once had a TA tell me that I should not let the kids play conkers because they could get injured. There are adults who facilitate the lack of grit. Of course there are. Of course there are. And this is what I mean, right? It's anybody. So it's absolutely fine to say, I think there's a lack of grit. I think there's a lack of grit now compared to before, right? Okay, what's the solution? Now, I agree with you. I think, well, one possible solution is to allow kids more space to make mistakes, to not have a sort of, it's all the teacher's fault. It's always, if something bad, it's always the teacher's fault. It doesn't matter now what the contexts are, what the thing, it's like the teachers need to be accountable for this. It's like, we need to put a little bit of ownership back on to the kids, right? And the parents, of course, a bit more accountability, a bit more responsibility. I think another solution is to also maybe look at the thresholds of what constitutes, you know, a problem. Like we talked about the fire brigade coming and a parent saying, oh, you know, we can't have the fire brigade. Let's make a complaint. It's like, that doesn't meet our threshold. That's invalid. We're not even going to warrant that with a mediation conversation. Get your, you know, they're going to come in, the end, unless you can bring me a doctor's certificate to say that they have a thing about fire brigades and firemen that causes them, you know, immense trauma. Okay, unless you can do that, you're going to come in and do that, right? Yeah. When it's not meeting the threshold. So Phillipson could say, look, we're going to change our sort of thresholds. You know, it needs to meet certain bars. Of course, that's going to be difficult because everything's different. Everything's contextual. Every child is different. We know. But that could be one. And yeah, beyond that sort of, I don't know what, because I agree with you. You can't really teach it. I mean, okay, I think stories do help. I think stories of people who have shown resilience and grit, if that's teaching grit, okay, yeah, I think stuff like that has its place through assemblies, through narratives in English or history or other subjects of like, okay, this person did really well because they did this and this, all right, through a story, you can sort of do that a little bit, right? I do think that's valid. So if that's teaching grit, yes, you can teach a bit of grit. But ultimately, it does come down to that value system. And Ray, you made the best point of sort of, you know, that age of 0 to 5. You know, what happens in it? Where? Yeah. I finished my rant. But I could go further. But yeah, this whole thing just entitlement. You know, where that entitlement comes from, where that sort of lack of, feeling like you need to work through things to get things, you know.
And the expectation again that teachers should do this. This is another thing. You know, we're going to show you how to brush your teeth, then we're going to show you how to be brave in the face of adversity. You know,
I once, Ray, you say that. I once tweeted about the whole brushing teeth thing. I got absolutely battered by people saying like, you know, we've always done this, or no, it's a really good thing, and But it's like,
I remember. Okay, right. So context. I'm 37. I went to primary school in Canada, so this is very different from now or in this country. I remember in school learning about brushing teeth. I remember us like, I don't know if we had an actual toothbrush, if we were practicing, but it was very much, I remember thinking in my, like, what was I, 5, maybe, brain, this is what I do at home. It felt like reinforcement of what was done at home. I had no awareness of what anyone else, any other kids in the class had been doing at home. I didn't have that kind of level of anything yet. But I remember thinking like, oh, this is what I do at home. And there were ads on the TV. Like I used to watch Sesame Street a lot. And I feel like it might've been in Sesame Street, but there's this little cartoon that I think of to this day. And it was a little cartoon of a kid brushing their teeth and they left the water running. And I think it was a split screen. And as the water was running from the tap, from the faucet, the water was draining out of a pond and there was a fish that was slowly running out of water. And I remember watching this around the same time my school was reinforcing these toothbrushing habits. And I was like, and I still think about that every time somebody leaves a tap on, it drives me mad. So I was getting these messages from different places. It's never been just the parent's job. You know, if you want to say it takes a village, fine. These messages need to be reinforced and come from different angles. But to expect a school to be the sole provider of that type of education, or the first time that a child comes in contact with brushing teeth, is a joke. And anyone who batters you on Twitter for that is a joke likewise. It's absurd. There have to be things that come from home and that come from the parents before the messages can be effectively reinforced elsewhere. They have to be. How can you? Blows my mind.
Sure. David's commented, I just dipped into this. It's a fascinating talk about grit. Ray seems to be saying things that resonated. I'll circle back to the recording. David, it's not worth it, mate. If you still watch it, don't. We've said the same thing for 20 minutes, right? There's no point. You've got the key messages. Mabel's just commented, I work in EYFS. Do not get me started. Children in pants all day, only to be picked up by parents and put into pull-ups and into a buggy, then given a phone to subdue them. It's the tip of an iceberg. Anyone want to get fired and comment on that? I don't want to this week. I can't this week. I can't. Maybe next month. But no.
I just think millennials and Gen Z are the worst parents in the history of time. That's where I'm at. And that's all I got.
Oh my God. No, I mean, it's, and again, we've seen the stories, haven't we, about sort of kids coming in nappies, not toilet trained, stuff like that seems to be common now.
Don't know how to hold a book.
Don't know how to hold a book. Don't know how to, like, things like even things in my teaching, like, I don't know, draw a line. I don't know, just stuff like
literally draw a line.
I don't know. It's like things that you just like, what? Just, I don't know. I mean, there's always been, of course, we don't want to sort of go too far with it all, but it's definitely, you know, the case that things have gone a certain way, huh? Maybe not. Maybe there's someone out there that disagrees with us. If you're watching this and you disagree with us, then tell us. I think there's somebody now outside his house who's been watching this, who's turned up to give us some abuse about the teeth, saying, you know, you've gone to the wrong house, whoever's out there. It's Ray's. Ray was the one who was insulting Jay's parents. It wasn't Lucy. Lucy wasn't saying that. It was Ray. We can share her address. Right. So anyway, David, thanks for your comment. And, you know, Anna, thanks for meeting us. She's in Portugal. Well, welcome, Anna. And if you want to post a comment or anything, then get involved. All right, have we finished with grit? Have we got a conclusion on grit before we move on to toilets?
I think so. I think we concluded.
All right, let's move on to toilets. Before we do, let's thank John Catt Education, our amazing sponsor, one more time. You sponsor all our shows on Teachers Talk Radio. If you haven't heard of John Catt, they're a big publisher coming out of the UK, but actually they distribute globally. So get involved at johncattbookshop.com. Grab yourself a book, people. Anyway, the other story we were going to look at was the whole toilets thing. Now, there was a a survey that appeared. I think it was done by Parent Kind. Basically, it revealed 1 in 6 school toilets are rated unclean. A poll of 2,000 parents found that 17% of parents rated the toilets at their child's school as unclean. I mean, have the parents seen the toilets? That's my first question. How can they rate them unclean?
That was my first thought too.
They're not in the school. How do they know they're unclean? They're probably right based on what the kids are saying, right? But we'll come on to the whys in a little bit. 31% of families said they'd raise concerns about toilets with school staff. Okay. When parents complain about the state of their child's toilets, 43% say nothing changes. One parent told the charity that the toilets were so dirty their children felt like they were stepping into a horror movie. Anyways, it goes on and on. Big thing, they're calling for more funding on the toilets. Build new buildings, new toilets. I mean, that part is a valid point. I mean, some school buildings are an absolute joke. And, you know, they haven't been invested in whatsoever. Just a joke.
Yeah.
You know, and I do sympathize personally with the whole thing of if we can increase military spending by X amount, we should be able to increase school building spending by an even smaller proportion than that, just to improve a few more schools. Yeah. There you go. Controversial political point raised by Tom. Anyways, back to the toilets thing. Yeah, what do we think? What do we think about the toilets thing?
I think it's okay. So the worst toilets I've ever seen, funnily enough, in girls' schools, 2 different girls' schools. But the common thing there was the age of the buildings. There's something about these old toilets. They just stink. Like the plumbing, the pipes, you can smell it's horrific. And you would think like, ooh, boys' toilets have this reputation for being a horror show, but actually the most disgusting toilets I've ever seen, old building in a girls' school. Genuinely frightening. I used to have to go in there and find truanting kids all the time. And in one of the schools, and was just like, the staff toilets were pretty grim just because of the same issue. But I'd go into those girls' toilets and I just think, why? I don't blame them for not wanting to be in here. It's pretty disgusting. I think the parents and the kids who are complaining have a huge point.
Well, listen, there's a combination of issues here. One of the funny things in that article, in that survey, and all the other stuff around it that didn't come up, vandalizing of the toilets by the kids. It wasn't even mentioned. Why are so many toilets in a horror condition? It's not just to do with the plumbing. It's not just to do with the buildings. It's not just to do with the time of day. It's not just to do with the number on roll in the school. It's to do with the kids not looking after the toilets and not having even minimal levels of like care. It's like, I mean, it's just like, and this is happening in loads and loads of places nowadays. You know, it's not just like, you know, like your massive comprehensive in Luton, right, or wherever. Okay, it's also it's happening all over the place, and some of it is weird because it's like, what can I vandalize? I know the toilet's an easy option.
It's because it's the only place where they're not constantly watched.
Yeah.
And it's reduced in the school I'm in now has those style of toilets, which actually would have made me slightly uncomfortable as a student, but where it's almost like an open entry door. It's like a double door size entry, I guess. And then there's an open area with the sinks, and then there's cubicles or semi kind of cubicles. They're not all completely blocked off, but like individual cubicles on the other side. And those obviously have the cubicle door. So theoretically, the only actual physical barrier between you doing your number 2 and the kids and the staff walking past is that thin cubicle door. And that really would have made me uncomfortable as a student. But it is blocked off. No one's like climbing over it or trying to look under. No one's doing anything because someone's on duty who can see in. The kids can't vandalize anything outside of the cubicles in the main bit. They can't, break the sinks on purpose because there's a camera outside the toilets, but it's aimed at the opening. It can't see the cubicles, but it can see sinks. So between the staff eyes in the open space and the CCTV, it drastically reduces the amount of possible vandalism that can take place. But the bottom line is they're still being watched. It's reduced in those type of toilets because they're still being watched. The toilets where they're not being watched, that's where the vandalism happens. They do it where they're not being watched. It has nothing to do with the toilets. It's just kids taking out bundled up rage and frustration and doing what they can because they're children in spaces where they know they're not currently being observed. So the more, I don't really know the implications of that, or I'm not even convinced it's got worse, because it used to happen when I was in school. It's always happened. But maybe increased surveillance means they go even more wild when they're not being surveilled. I don't know.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Sure, I'd buy into that. Shorter break times. You know, 10-minute break, 20-minute lunch, 25-minute lunch, detentions, activity clubs, you know, you can't go here, you can't go there, whatever. But I don't know. I mean, it's always been an issue, but yeah, go on, Lucy.
If you look at the number of people, the number of toilets per the number of students, then the ratio is very a massive ratio, sort of maybe one toilet per 200 students, for example. I don't know, I've never actually calculated it, but there are a lot of people wanting to use the same toilets, generally in a short space of time, such as a break time. Now, if you look at equivalent places, so supermarket toilets, coffee shop toilets and places like that, they are also often revolting, and they have a signing sheet for people to go and check them. Now, we cannot afford as schools to put money into having a permanent sort of inspection of toilets. The cleaners come in at the end of the school day to employ somebody to go in and keep an eye on these things. So in terms of the cleanliness of the toilets, is up to the user to leave the toilet in a decent state. If you drop a load of toilet roll, then pick it up, pop it in a bin, or if it's not too much, in the toilet. So there is an incumbency on people, and adults are just as bad, judging by the state of public toilets. In terms of vandalism, is a huge issue. At the school I was in, my classroom was near the boys' toilets, where the last door before the boys' toilets, and you could hear gangs of children. So you'd have to send an email, someone needs to go down to the toilets and check, and they could flush up sort of 12, 15 kids that were in there, boys. These were the boys' toilets as well, and there'd be doors taken off. They'd be flushing whole toilet rolls down the toilet in order to try to block them. Food at lunchtime. So our cleaner used to come in and she'd say, "Oh, I've just had a terrible time." She said, food, you'd never believe how much they flushed down the toilets to try and block them. And so the kids who are complaining about the state of the toilets are the ones that go in after those kids have done that. They might, I guess they might not even know that it's happened, so they just think our toilets are dirty, when actually it's our fellow students have so little respect for the things that we have that they want to damage and trash them.
Yeah, I've said that to students a number of times. I remember my year 7s at a year 7 forum last year, and they were shocked and appalled. I don't know what their primary toilets were like, but they were, and obviously they're tiny little year 7s, and you have these big groups of Key Stage 4 students, it's really intimidating. It makes the younger students not even want to go in there, which is a whole other
absolutely.
set of problems. And I remember saying to them, you know, you realize that the reason they're disgusting, as you said right now, is because you all have been here all day using the toilets. Like that's they're disgusting because of you, not you individually, but you, the collective. That's this is where this come from. So I'll pass it on, but yeah,
it's a tricky one. It's really difficult because, as I say, I mean, you know, is anybody, you know, having a free period, a free lesson, going to be on duty to go and clean the toilets after lunch times and break times? And then, of course, we've got the question over the use of toilets during lesson time, which is a hugely contentious issue, because we all know if you're stuck in a motorway traffic jam, no one's getting out for the toilet and everybody's able to hold on. But, you know, suddenly, you know, they come back from their weekend in York, you know, and they tell you all about their great time, but it took a long time to get home because they're stuck in a traffic jam. They're like, oh, miss, I need to go to the toilet. We've just had break. Yeah, I didn't have time and break. And, you know, so those kinds of discussions, you know, when I worked in primary school in year 6, I remember the teacher saying, you won't be allowed to go to the toilet during the lesson in secondary school, so we need to get you practiced for this now. But actually, you don't have a choice. If you tell a student they can't go to the toilet, that you're likely to have a quiet word afterwards. You know, you do need to let some children go. How do you make that judgment? You know, we've had passes to go to the toilet so that we can identify kids who are swinging the lead, identify children who constantly go out of lessons, every lesson, to go to the toilet. You know, these are huge problems, and they text each other in lessons and say, oh, you know, meet me down in the toilets, and then that's how you end up with a whole group of kids in there. It's a huge problem.
I mean, I never remember in secondary many kids going to the toilets or being allowed to go. Like, right or wrong, I just don't remember that happening.
It wasn't a thing. People didn't hang out there because it was dirty and gross, and that's disgusting.
But you also weren't allowed to. You just weren't allowed to go generally, I don't think, unless it was like an emergency or whatever. But I suppose it's just judging, I guess, what is it? Because you don't. That's the problem. That 1 in 10 could be a problem. And
it is, and we do feel like, on one side, I love saying to a kid, you just had break time, sit down. It's like, oh, good, that's you learning a life lesson. But on the other hand, I look at some of the female students especially, and I just think, I don't want to be the person responsible for that 11-year-old that's just learning how to manage her cycle, leaking all over herself and never being able to forget that for the rest of her life. So and on the flip side, I also, like, I have to run to the toilet between lessons all the time. I can't think on a full bladder. I stress in the car on road trips. It's a thing. Like, some people are just better at managing it than others. But I managed to hold it in school, but I do have a lot of sympathy for these kids that sometimes do need to go. But then if the school is unclear in any way about what the rules are, you get teachers, like I just explained, in these kind of unclear situations doing really inconsistent things. And that causes even more problems.
Yeah, and you can't have a list. You can't have a list of kids who use the toilets all the time and therefore they can't go to the toilet anymore. You have children who have passes if they have issues, medical issues that require them to get to the toilet, and that's fine. But it's those judgment calls that are really difficult. And of course, well, the first thing you get if you say no to a regular sort of toilet goer every single lesson, the first thing you get is, you know, a torrent of anger, and it's disruption. It's disruptive to the lesson. And so sometimes it is, if the judgment is, I'd just let you go, and then, you know, when you come back. But I really don't know what the solution is to the problem, because, as you say, when you've got, you know, girls who need to get to the toilet, then obviously, you know, the repercussions of not letting somebody go, including boys as well, actually, you know, are huge. So I don't know how you manage it, but teachers always manage it, you know, unless somebody's, you know, got something wrong with them. I had a colleague who would say, I'm not right today, so, you know, I think she had colitis or something, so, you know, if I knock on your door, because we had interconnecting doors, if I knock on your door, can you just keep an eye on mine, because it means I've got to run. But on the whole, most teachers manage to do it for a whole lesson, and nobody talks about our human rights or any of those things, you know. So I feel as though, again, it's that being soft on kids, isn't it? It's that sort of not teaching them. But, you know, when you are trying to pile 1,000, 1,500 children through the few toilets during a break time, you know, before they come to the next lesson, we tell them to, rehydrate fully. And it's so hard. It's really hard.
So I'm going with the numbers in my head, but I think it's 1 cubicle per 40 students in my school.
Yeah.
So that's not that bad.
Is it?
It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot.
A lot of students per toilet, isn't it? In a break
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Break time and this is the other thing. You think 1 for 40. Okay, well, that's not a big deal. They don't need to congregate in the dozens at before school during lessons. The odd one goes out. It's absolutely fine. There's loads of cubicles. But then at break time and lunchtime, how are you supposed to, especially when the break time, by the time you get out of lessons and get ready to go to your next one is 15 minutes. How are you supposed to cycle through every kid that needs to pee in 15 minutes? It's physically impossible. Lunchtime, by the time you cut the beginning and end off, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Again. So when are these kids supposed to go?
Yeah. Do you know, I have no memory of the toilets at secondary school. I have no memory of what they were like. I can't think where they were. I don't know if that means that I never went when I was at school. I've no idea. But I genuinely, when I think back, and I left in 89, so it's a long time ago, but I don't have any memory of the toilets. I couldn't picture them or where they were or anything.
I could probably draw you a floor plan of every single one in my high school.
Really? No, I can't
remember.
I
can't remember.
Yeah, I can remember my primary school, but not my secondary school. So maybe I was one of those kids who didn't go to the loo. I don't know. I don't remember any trauma around it. Nothing. Just don't remember the toilets. Don't remember an issue around it at all.
But now I'm thinking about one part, because I went to like 6 different primary schools. One of them had a couple hundred kids in the school, had 150 or so. It was quite small. 150 maybe students in the whole school altogether. I'm not sure.
Right,
but there was one toilet with like 4 or 5 cubicles in for all the girls, and then another one for all the boys. So that's higher. But we managed. I feel like, I don't know. But are we managing? And this was mentioned in the article, like, are these kids actually managing? Did we actually manage? Or did we just not drink enough water and get dehydrated and hold it in so we all got UTIs?
We didn't take water bottles to school when I was at school. No. But when my children started in the early 2000s, that was one of the things you bought. You bought your book bag, you bought their water bottle, that was a complete change. So I guess we just didn't drink much. When you think about it, we would only have been able to buy a drink. High juice we used to buy in our lunch queue at secondary school, a carton of high juice. That was probably all I drank all day.
No, same. I don't remember drinking water ever. So yeah,
we used the water fountains in Canada, but then when we moved to the Bahamas,
we did have water fountains.
But then in the Bahamas, obviously, it was you have to bring a water bottle. You have to have something in yours so you can go not have it on your desk all the time. That's a weird thing that kids do now. That's unnecessary. Yeah. But you have to have water or a drink in your bag or in your lunch tin so you can go get it.
It is a mad point, actually, because I don't remember having any. I just don't remember having any facility to drink water in secondary school. Primary, we had water fountains.
We definitely had a water fountain. I do remember that, because people used to put their finger on the water outlet and then spray it at people. So I remember that. I remember where they were as well. So it almost proves the toilet theory. I don't think I ever went to toilet during school hours.
Good old days. Anyway, guys, let's wrap it up. It's been a good chat. We've got through a lot. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be back next Sunday for more points of view, maybe different people, but certainly it'll be the same idea, discussing the biggest stories from the week in education, biggest ideas from the week in education. If you've got any comments or anything like that, don't forget to tag us, Teachers Talk Radio, wherever you're watching or interacting, or if you've listened to this as a podcast, then thank you very much. And don't forget to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever it is you're listening. So thanks, everybody, and take care, and have a great rest of the Sunday. See you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.